Hey, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the RevRx Podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to this week's guest, University of Georgia football legend, Rennie Curran. Rennie, brother, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Yes, sir. Thanks so much for having me, Chad.
Yes, sir. I've been following you for a while, and of course, I've known you from your Georgia football days. In my opinion, you are on the Mount Rushmore of Georgia linebackers, man.
Thank you,
You were so fun to watch, man. You hit so hard.
man.
You'd be seeing some of these passes, and I'm like, oh, here comes Rennie.
Yeah.
And so exciting. And you're a Georgia boy. You're up here in the Atlanta area, Gwinnett County. And so I followed your career. And of course, when a lot of people think about Rennie Curran, they think about Georgia football. They think about 3-time All-American. They think about team captain. They think about those hard hits. They think about a third-round draft pick in the NFL by the Tennessee Titans. But here's what I've told you offline, and what I want to share with my audience today. There's a lot behind that number 35 that I grew up watching. There's a lot to the man behind that, and I can't wait to get into some of that today. But before we get into your story, man, can you just introduce yourself to our listeners? Help us to get to know you just a little better.
Yeah, sure. So a little bit about me. I can't start off my story without talking about my family, my foundation. Both parents being Liberian immigrants, that's a big part of what a lot of people don't know about me is just the journey of how I got to the game of football and what built the bio. It's not the accolades, it's not those things. It's really the story of hard work, discipline, sacrifice, faith, humility. And so born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, son of Liberian immigrants, of course, spent first half of my life playing the game of football, really trying to become that high performer. But the true transformation came after I got cut from my first NFL team. So went on, played University of Georgia from 07 09, was drafted by the Tennessee Titans, played with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, played in Canada all from the span of 2010 to 2017. And through the journey of bouncing around, being a free agent, being in that no man's land is where the Lord really took me on a whole new journey. So football was just really the platform. It was a vehicle to get me into what I'm doing now. So as I went through that first transition, I started to understand that it wasn't really about being this high performer. It's really about taking all these experiences, the platform that I had, the reach that it gave me to really be able to talk and connect with different types of people. And that's the beauty of sports, is a universal language. But being able to use that as a form of now leadership development. So when I got cut the first time, I realized that there were many people who would go through the same position, who would lose their jobs, who would lose relationships, who would be in positions where they never thought they would be after years of investing in a certain area of life. And so that encouraged me and inspired me to write my first book called Free Agent. And Free Agent really talks about the concept of being in a no man's land in life, being in a time of transition or a time of adversity. And so that's what really created the platform for me to get into public speaking, which is something that I always done. I'd always been a captain on the team and done post-game interviews. So I was getting the reps. I just didn't know that it was leading me in a certain direction. And that's the beauty of what God does. Like he'll infuse certain things in you and deposit certain things in you when you don't even realize it. And so as I got cut and I was going through all these different changes, trying to, become this high performing athlete. At the same time, I was building leadership skills. I was getting different experiences, working with different organizations. And so I leveraged that to eventually write my first book, get into keynote, delivering keynote presentations, doing executive and leadership coaching, got certified in that. I started working with guys like John Gordon, who's similar to John Maxwell, and several others who are, former Navy SEALs who focus on emotional intelligence and mental toughness, and just several other guys. And through that, I started working with different organizations from Chick-fil-A, Coca-Cola, Fidelity, the list goes on. And so fast forward to 2017, I ended up tearing my patella tendon, and that's what really led me full-time into leadership development. And so now I'm a full-time keynote speaker, executive coach. I'm also the founder of the Sports and Business Network, which is a network that brings together current and former athletes and business leaders. So we host events on a monthly basis. And then I also am launching my first app this month called Former. And Former is basically going to be the LinkedIn for former athletes, fans, and businesses. So just got a lot of great things happening, man. I'm blessed. I'm a father as well. My daughter was born in Athens. Her name is Ileana. And so that was a major part of my life. And that's the most important job besides being a servant. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, love that. And there's so many different ways that that God has used your story to kind of shape who you are. And I see that in your life very clear cut. And, he does that in all of our lives, doesn't he? He
100%.
takes the things that we face, and a lot of times the toughest situations, the things we probably wish we weren't going through,
Yeah.
like being cut, like tearing your patellar tendon.
Hmm.
Some of those things God is using to shape us and develop us in ways that we can't dream or imagine.
That's it.
And in your life after football, man, it has been inspiring. And
Thank
so thank you for pouring into youth, into leaders, and developing that next generation. I appreciate the space that you're in.
you,
And
sir.
I'd love to talk a little about, you mentioned about your parents, Liberian immigrants, and I'd love to kind of camp there just a little bit because you have some really humble beginnings. I think a lot of us can relate to that. A lot of times, maybe some people were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, so to speak. A lot of us weren't, and but you have used some of those humble beginnings to really propel yourself and to set yourself up through guidance, through wisdom, and through Lord writing your story. But what did those early days teach you about faith, about hard work, and about sacrifice?
Yeah, I got to see it in real time. I mean, there were times where, I just saw how my parents lived their life, how they conducted themselves. My mom was a nurse. She worked
Mm.
at Grady Hospital and right in the middle of Atlanta. My dad, entrepreneur, fixed shoes, and he bought into a shoe repair franchise. So we drive from middle of Atlanta and like around Brookhaven for those people who live around Atlanta, all the way to Kennesaw every day. So an hour back and
Well,
forth. And during this time, I'm the youngest of three. I'm the only boy. We live in a 3-bedroom apartment, and there's a civil war going on in Liberia off and on. Over 400,000 people lose their life. Millions become displaced, including a lot of my cousins and uncles and aunts and family friends. And so I'm seeing in real time how my parents are working, but then they're not just working for themselves and not just working for our family. They're working to help, their extended family, and they're sending money back to Liberia. They're sending clothes. They're packing up big bags and sending that and helping cousins and uncles and aunts come here. And we're in this 3-bedroom apartment, but it's always full. My mom's
yeah,
waking up before she goes to work, cooking a big pot of food. And like everybody's always fed, doors always open. Like that's the kind of home I grew up in. It was just a lot of selflessness. Same thing with my dad, just seeing the sacrifices that he made. And so they didn't have a lot, man, but what we had, we were resourceful with it. Parents always had me in church. I grew up actually before I played football, I played music. And so my piano teacher at 8 years old, he was a guy who played piano in church. So he taught me a lot. And then I played drums in the church, eventually got into orchestra. So music was a big part of my life. And so I was always playing music in church and just that was a big part of my life. But more than anything they did in terms of, sharing the word with me, it was how they lived their life, how selfless they were, how humble they were. Even though we had money, like we learned how to go without. There's times where I knew I couldn't ask for certain things because they had a bigger mission, a bigger purpose that they were serving. And so it just became something that was ingrained in me, like just to give, to learn how to not be defined by material things, to learn that, life is much bigger than just what you're trying to accomplish. And so that was the kind of mentality, man, that I now apply to my own life.
hmm
I took it into the game of football with my teammates and just how I sacrificed on the field, how it just meant something more because I knew like a lot of those hard hits you talked about, that came from a deep sense of like ownership, a deep sense of like understanding that God gave me this gift and I can't waste it. Like I can't just be out here and have this talent and go halfway or just go through the motions. Like I have to utilize this as a gift. I have to be a steward of this because it can be taken away at any moment. And so that's how I approach every single thing that I did, every single moment. And my parents knew nothing about football. It was a beautiful thing because I didn't have my dad in my ear trying to say, "Hey, why didn't you make this play? Why didn't you do this?" Like everything was really coming from a place of self motivation and self determination, and just understanding that, hey, they were very encouraging. They were like, "Hey, if this is what you want to do, you can do it." But they weren't out there after practice. They weren't. My coaches picked me up for a lot of the practices and games, so they weren't out there in presence, but they were out there in terms of values, in terms of the mentality they instilled. And so that's a lot what drove me to perform at such a high level. And we fell on some really hard times, but I still, even during those hard times when my dad lost his business, he fell into a season of depression, alcoholism and things like that. My mom, she had a season where she almost died from a surgery, but even through those moments, man, I saw how God moved in their life, and I also saw Him move in the form of other people who came and showed up. My little league coach, teachers, trainers who allowed me to train for free when they didn't have to. So just not just my parents, but my whole entire community, the Liberian community. I mean, I've just been blessed, man, to have amazing people around me, starting with them.
Yeah. It matters who shapes us.
Yeah,
And here's the thing too, we're always shaping other people. We just may not realize it.
that's
Talking about your little league coach, I'm coaching my kids' little league team, and you don't know how much it matters to some of these kids to show an interest in them, and to show a little bit of belief in them, because they may not get that at home.
100%.
You mentioned your dad wasn't like, why didn't you do? I see a lot of that,
Yeah.
and so realizing that you can make a difference in somebody's life, and
Yes.
you may not even realize it till later on.
Yeah, 100%. I'd love to share on that because I know there's going to be a lot of parents watching this, a lot of coaches like yourself who are listening in. And the biggest thing that you can do for a child at that young, tender age is help them get clear on their identity, invest in their identity, speak life into them, not into their mistakes, but where you see them at. Right? If they make a mistake, is you can say, "Oh, I can't believe you did this. How many times am I going to have to tell you?" Or you can say, "Hey, I believe in you. You're better than this." You can speak life into the vision of what you have for them. And when I tell you, man, so many guys are struggling, so many men, so many people in general are struggling in their life today because those inner voices that they have from their childhood are still resonating, are still ruminating in their minds. And you cannot get away from that. Your identity is formed. That's what people don't understand. Identity starts early, like the formation of it. How you see yourself, your perception of yourself starts very early and it's formed from the coaches, the teachers, how they look at them, the things that they say, the body language that they have when they make a mistake. All those things start shaping how you see yourself and ultimately what you believe you can accomplish. And so I'm so passionate about that. And I'm so thankful that I have little league coaches that I still talk to this day.
That's
Like I
cool.
mentioned, my trainer, Chip Smith, I messaged him the other day. Coach Rick, I've had so many people, but then I've had not so good coaches who I can still remember. I've had not so good teachers, not and children, people do not forget how you
That's right.
feel. So if I can stress anything to any parent, any coach that's listening, I know the wins and losses are important. I know the grades are important, but at the end all be all, you are building a person, a human being who is going to be a future leader, who is also going to take a lot of the blueprint and the things that you give them, not just what you say, but how you live your life, the example you show, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all those areas of life. What blueprint are you giving them? And that's something I'm so passionate to talk about, especially when I go into these, any type of organization, is just really stressing those principles of not just being good at your job, but hey, being good as a father in every
Yeah.
area of your life.
Being a good human.
Yeah, just think
Yeah.
good. Yep,
Yeah, it's not that hard, but yet, we have to be intentional about it.
really do.
And I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I love how you brought that up about you remember those voices.
Mhm.
And my dad was super encouraging growing up in sports and everything, and he wasn't ever real critical. But I had a couple of coaches, and I had one that stands out as I played baseball. I have one that stands out as a really positive voice in my life. His name's Charles Culberson. We called him Big Charlie. His son, Charlie Culberson, played for the Braves a few years ago. And but he was such a positive influence on me. He always believed in me, and he would put me in places that would allow me to succeed. And then I remember a high school coach, high school baseball coach, that was not a positive voice for me. Then, matter of fact, I still heard his voice basically telling me that I wasn't good enough
Yeah.
20 years down the road.
Yep.
When I first got a nudge to start this podcast, the limiting beliefs that I began to believe about myself were nobody's going to listen to you.
Right.
You're not good enough. You can't do that. And I'm like, ooh, where did that come from?
Mhm.
And I began to do some work. I had a coach that I was working with, and I began to do some work digging back.
Yeah.
And it was that high school coach that really was the loudest voice in my ear.
Yeah.
20 years later. That's amazing.
It really is. It really, really is. It's so powerful. Same here. I mean, there's no way I could be up on stages speaking in front of tons of people in different parts of the US in rooms where sometimes I'm the only African American male in the room
Yeah. Well,
and not do that inner work on myself. Like I had to. Same thing. Go back to those times in my childhood where I was standing in front of a room and people laughed at me or a teacher looked at me a certain way, and they don't know that I saw that. They don't see how I saw them in that moment in terms of their body language and how they saw me, whether they saw me as smart or not.
Hmm.
All those moments stick with you, like you said, and it gets very deep. And we think they're gone until you, like you said, you try to start something new. You try to start that business. You try to write that book. You try to do something that's out of your comfort zone. Then your brain starts referencing because your brain's number one job is to protect you.
Hmm.
And so in those moments when we're children, especially, we're trying to protect ourselves, and we're still trying to form who we are in the world. So a lot of times those people make us walk on eggshells. So it's like when we go back to those moments where we're out of our comfort zone, where our mind goes into fight or flight, we immediately revert back to those moments. So if you don't do that inner work, man, to uncover those subconscious beliefs and thoughts and those little traumas that are buried, man, it will stick with you, and it will be like a governor, just like you have a car has a governor that holds it back reaching a certain miles per hour or a certain level of performance. Those things will serve as governors mentally in your life that will hold you back. And no matter what you do, no matter how many books you read, no matter how smart you are, how many conferences you go to, you will not be able to move past that point, man. And there's so many people I work with. I'm so passionate because I work with so many leaders, so many entrepreneurs. They are so talented. They've accomplished so much, but they're not even willing to invest in themselves. They're not even willing to do certain things. And it's because they don't have that belief. And it stems from like the self-limiting thoughts and beliefs and subconscious things that are there that they don't even a lot of times realize is there.
Right. And, that's a good segue into realizing that you are not what your worst critics think about you.
Yeah.
You are not that. No matter what your brain tells you 20 years later, you are not that. And doing that work is important.
Hmm.
But a lot of people looked at you, Rennie, earlier in your career, and they said, this guy's too small.
Hmm.
He doesn't have the ideal size to be, a linebacker at a D1 college or in the NFL. You're undersized. People looked at you and they figured that your ceiling had already been determined by your physical size. But what about that did you use as like motivation, determination? How did that fuel you, realizing that some had kind of said, no, you're not good enough?
It was everything because in that moment, it wasn't, and I speak for everybody who is doubted, everybody who has been called not too tall enough, not pretty enough, not smart enough, not capable. And a lot of times it stems from our own voice, right? That's the loudest, that's the first voice you have to overcome is your own voice. And it was the same scenario when it came to my life. I had to first be the biggest cheerleader for myself mentally. I had to really subscribe to what my truth was going to be very early on because it was all around me, whether it was teammates laughing, whether it was a coach who said, "Hey, don't think somebody's going to recruit you. You are a little bit undersized." Like it, and it would be sometimes they felt like they were really trying to help me. They were really trying
Yeah,
to
let's tamper your expectations, right?
it's always the people closest to you that are going to try to be realistic, that are going to try to make sure that you don't have unrealistic thoughts and belief. But it's like, why not? Why not believe? And I told myself that. Why not me? Why can't I be that one? And when I was in those times where I'm by myself, that's when you need it most, right? You're by yourself. You're looking at yourself early in the morning in that mirror before you start your day. You're in that weight room, and we always have the mirrors where you're under that bar and you look yourself in the mirror. You're watching that film by yourself after the day is done. That's where you have to have those conversations where it's like, man, I'm gonna be different. I'm gonna show up, man. I'm not just gonna go through practice and just go through it, just say I got done. I'm gonna get just a little bit better when I'm under that bar. And before I get under that bar, I choose to put an extra 10 pounds on, an extra 20 pounds on. I'm watching that video or listening to Larry Munson on the radio after my little league
Classic.
team, and
Yeah.
it's a classic game. And you got Thomas Davis playing, and I'm visualizing myself on the field. I'm seeing myself like one day I'm gonna be out there. One day he's gonna be calling my name. Like all those moments is what made me, and like what just slowly made me believe. I'm sitting in church and I'm just praying. I'm reading the word, and I'm like, I'm listening to the story of David and Goliath. And I'm like, man, God didn't make no mistakes on me. He gave me a slingshot. And in every moment, even when I got knocked down, even when I had a bad game, it's like, okay, even when I had a good game, it's like, how can I take this a little bit step further and keep growing and keep moving forward? And that mindset, that mentality is contagious and it builds momentum. And it's like you start man, having a good day here, and you start seeing things, and then God will give you teammates also too that will cover you, because it's not just about you. It's about who you have around you. It's that coach that believes in you. It's that trainer that, like I said, that gives you that little bit of extra edge. So I will be in there, man, after school, 3 hours. I'm putting an extra 3 hours in. I got a bungee cords on. I got the weighted vest on. I'm doing that extra work in the dark. And that's the things, those are the things that nobody sees, man. And if you're willing to dedicate yourself and have that faith and that belief, you may not always get to the top. I knew there was always a chance I may never get to Georgia. I may never get to the league, but I knew I had, all I needed was one yes. All I needed was a chance. And anybody who's listening, man, you don't have to have a million people to agree with you, to like you, to believe in your vision or anything that you're doing. All you need is that one yes. And that at that next level, all you need is another yes, a couple people to advocate for you and believe in you. So for Georgia, it was Mike Bobo who stuck his neck out and said, "Hey, let's give this kid a chance." Then I got there, and then it was the Tennessee Titans who gave me a chance. All right, and now the same is true as an entrepreneur. I'm not looking for every company to support me. I'm just looking for those companies that I'm aligned with in terms of values, and we're gonna rock. We're gonna win.
Man, I love it. And now you've peaked, man. You're on the RevRx podcast, and this is
That's
the
it.
ultimate pinnacle of your career, I'm sure. So,
The dream. Yes.
what we're talking about is reaching your full potential.
Yeah.
And that's something that you're really doing a lot of work in today through your foundation, through speaking, through books, through coaching, through everything that you're doing. You're helping people reach their full potential. And I see it all over the place. Man, that's my heart too. As a pastor, I see people who are just kind of, floating through life and just barely surviving.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart because God has so much more for you than
So
just barely surviving. And I see it on the health side of things too, whether it be physical health or mental health or emotional health or, fill in the blank there. But I see that from the pharmacy perspective. So many people are letting a diagnosis or a current condition really be that governor that you mentioned that holds them back from reaching their full potential in life. And so I'm curious with you, you were, maybe undersized traditionally to reach your dreams, but you made up for that. And we don't have to talk about the accolades to understand that because you really reached your potential despite the fact you may not have been given the best set of physical traits to do that.
Mhm.
What are you teaching people and coaching people about when it comes to not letting some of these limiting thoughts, limiting beliefs stop you in your tracks? And here's one thing I want to maybe divert to. A lot of people who are around you may not believe in you the way you do because, hey, let's face it, sometimes when we face success in a big way, it threatens other people's status quos.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so a lot of times people want us to kind of stay down with them because they're just surviving and it's hard for them to watch someone else thrive. But what does reaching someone's full potential look like to Rennie Curran, someone who has really lived that out and then now is committed to helping others do the same?
Yeah. One of the things that my experience taught me was that you have to be holistic in your approach. When I think about reaching your fullest potential, getting to where the Lord wants you to be at the end of your life, being able to walk away from it, being able to look yourself in the mirror and know that you left everything on the table, leaving a legacy, all those things is not just about an inheritance in terms of money. I've never been at a funeral and heard the pastor or anybody who speaks said, "Hey, everybody, I want you to hear about this person's portfolio and how much money they raised over the course of their life and how many promotions they have." What do they talk about? They talk about the life that person lived. They talk about how that person showed up. They talk about all the investments they made in terms of serving others, how they made people feel. The family will talk about the relationships, right? Presence, right? All those things is what matter most. And that's what I believe when it comes down to living your fullest potential. Did you live your purpose? Did you know what you were sent here to do? And are you striving for that actively every single day? Or are you just trying to get to the next paycheck?
Yeah.
All right. And then the things that are within your control, your mental, your physical, your spiritual, your relationships, are you maximizing that? Are you so focused on getting to that, once again, that next paycheck, surviving, trying to get to the next, even for in the sports world, the coaches, the athletes, you see them who get to the highest level, they get to the second and third contract, but then at the end of it, they lose the life that they were trying to build. They lose their family. There's divorce. Their mental is not good. They're depressed. All right. So what's the point of accomplishing all these things and then losing all the other things that you were ultimately working for and ultimately what matters? And so a lot of what I help organizations and leaders focus on is not just being a high performer, because we all know those high performers who were great at what they did, but they're gone
Mm.
now. They've
Yeah.
been gone for years. All right. I'm not going to say any names, but high performing leaders, which means it doesn't mean you're not performing. It doesn't mean that I hear a lot of the David Goggins and the folks who say, oh, you can't have any balance, and if you want to be the best, if you want to be the greatest, you got to just be blind, have the blockers on, and just forget about it. That's not what I'm talking about. So you can go hard, but I'm talking about going hard holistically.
Yeah,
Go
that's right.
hard as a father. Go hard with your health. Go hard with your mindset and building your mental journal, mindfulness meditation, stretching, taking care of your temple, your nutrition. Go hard with your relationships. Even if it's limited, be mindful, be aware. It's performance with awareness. And a lot of organizations, their biggest problem is they're doing good enough. And that's one of the that's one of the enemies of greatness is good enough. So the numbers and everything are looking good, and the bottom line is climbing. So they're neglecting all these other areas. And you see that with so many leaders. So that's something that I'm passionate about. Whether I'm going in and talking about leadership, when I'm talking about team building, whether I'm talking about culture, I have principles and frameworks where it's helping you in the office, it's helping you as a leader, but holistically, these principles are universal. So it's also something that's going to help you at home. It's going to help you as a father. It's going to help you if you apply it to your physical life, to your spiritual life. And so that's a lot of what I do. And everything is research based. I have assessments, different things like that. So it's not just me, giving a rah speech. But I
Right.
meet with the leaders, I really understand what their goals and challenges are. And then I implement my presentations, my workshops, my keynotes based off of their needs and what will ultimately move the needle for them.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm very holistic as well. And I mean, that's kind of the place God's put me in life because being able to have a foot in both worlds, in the
Yeah.
faith world and then in the health world. I see things from a holistic perspective just naturally, but I see so many people. I mean, I don't say this with judgment, but I say this to give people hope. I see so many people who are, man, they're crushing it physically. I mean, they're like you said, you put on the blinders, and maybe that works for some people, but that doesn't work for most people. They're crushing it physically, man. They've got the best body. They've got biceps and abs and all these things, but they're absolutely failing at home.
Yeah.
Or they're crushing it in the business world,
Hmm.
but their marriage is a disaster.
Yeah.
Holistic approach is really what matters because you can be success in business, but if you're not a success at home, then that's really what matters.
What we doing?
And yeah, what are you doing? And so you mentioned something I wanted to kind of hone in on as well. And it's this idea of controlling what you can control.
Yeah.
So many times we get frustrated in life by some of these circumstances that happen to us, and we don't have any control over some of that. Can you help us think through your approach to some of these things? Because let's face it, there's things in life that have happened to you and me both that
Yeah.
we would not have chosen. However, by controlling the things we can control, we push through those things, and maybe it even helps us see things from a greater perspective.
100%. And I think when it comes to controlling what you can control, first thing you got to be aware of is what is in your control. And so many people are stressed out about so many things that they really cannot control. They really can't change. That company that you're part of that has a toxic culture, that relationship that you're in, that is toxic, that is falling apart. There's certain things like you're focused on that other person, you're focused on that boss, you're focused on that. What can you control within yourself, first and foremost? Can you control your attitude? Can you control how you show up? Can you control what you do before your level of preparation? Can you control your emotional intelligence, your ability to regulate your emotions? All those things are within your sphere of control. And so identifying those things and then where you are within those things is where it starts. Once you have awareness and you've tracked, just like if I use the example of if you were trying to whether improve in the weight room physically, you got to know your weight, you got to know your resting, metabolic rate, all those different things. You track it and then you make incremental gains and improvements. Same thing with finances. If you want to get better, you got to be financially literate. You got to know where you are, where your expenses are on a monthly basis. Same is true in life. So have you taken time to audit your life, where you are mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally? So once you know that, then that's where you can work with somebody like myself, whether it's a coach, whether it's a therapist, because sometimes it requires deeper work, a counselor, right? A pastor, and it can be specialists in other areas. But the key is you got to be intentional about creating an actual plan. It does you no good to be aware of these things because most people know they're lacking, but first they haven't really identified truly where they are, and then secondly, they don't have a plan to improve these things, and then third, they don't have any form of accountability. And if you're missing
That's
accountability,
big.
life is gonna happen. Things are gonna get in the way. Other priorities are gonna take place, right? So I believe those three components: awareness, action plan, and accountability, is really where you start to make those incremental changes. And then there's that point of delayed gratification because we all know if you've been doing a certain thing, you've been conditioning yourself a certain way, or your environment has conditioned you to operate a certain way, it's not just going to change overnight. No matter how hard you work. So you also going to have to spend that time just knowing, man, I'm going to have to put in this work. It's not going to be acknowledged by my body. It's not going to be acknowledged by the people around me, but I am making progress and it is going to lead to something. 5 years, 10 years down the road is going to create the results that I want. And then the most powerful thing about it that I think about is the people who are aligned with you, who are attached to you, because you're not just living for you. All of us, everybody listening to this, understand that you are a leader in some way, shape, or form. You may be a father, you may be a mother, right? Somebody in your sphere is impacted by your decisions on a daily basis. So it's not just you who is impacted, but it's also the people who are watching you, who are picking up on your values, who are picking up on the principles that you're communicating by your actions and by the decisions that you make. So I just think it's super important to be intentional about these things.
Yeah. Intentionality, man, that's the name of the game. And,
Yeah.
if you're out there struggling and, you can't put your finger on exactly what it is, but you're not living up to your full potential. You know that something's off and you feel like you're just surviving, then I encourage you, hey, take a deep breath,
Yeah.
and then do an audit, like we just talked about. Like figure out, where am I? What things are going well? What things are not going well? And
Yeah.
then come up with a plan. Because you can have the best of intentions all day long, but
Hmm.
without a plan to actually put those intentions into place, you're not going to see an improvement.
Yeah.
And that's where people like Rennie come in. Absolutely love that. So last question here, and we're banking in on this intentionality thing. Rennie, I'm curious, what habits have you put into place in your life? And the big three things that I like to talk about on this show are faith, family, and health.
Hmm.
So maybe that's a good way to divide it up. What habits have you put into your life, maybe around faith, around family, and around health, that have helped you to reach your full potential? Because I'm convinced we are shaped by our habits. Our habits make who we are. That's part of that intentionality process. So I'm curious your thought process, and I'm curious your habits.
Yeah. So my thing is creating those winning routines. When you think about any great athlete, your Steph Currys, your Tom Brady's, your Ray Lewis's, anybody who is great on a consistent level, LeBron James, we all have winning routines, things that we do without even having to think about it. So that habit starts to become integrated into our identity and it becomes a lifestyle. So literally it's part of your life. So what that looks like for me, my winning routines, first thing in the morning, I have my acronym that I coined: DPJ, devotion, prayer, and journaling. Devotion, prayer, journaling. And then when it comes to working out, after I do my devotion, prayer, and journaling for reflection, and each one of these hit on a different point. So I got my spiritual, I got my mental, my emotional, because I'm reflecting, right? I'm able to accept and have acceptance, a moment of acceptance, a moment of gratitude that really sets the tone for the day. Now I get into my health. So I'm either going to the gym. Monday is upper body, right? Wednesday is lower body. Friday is a full body workout. In between those days, I'm doing my stretching, yoga, and a quick exercise before I get into my business side of the day. And then in terms of relationships, I always make sure that I take that time, whether it's to check in on my daughter, see my family. Church is a big part of that. So I go to church, if at least twice a month I'm going to church. And so that gives me the relational fuel to just keep going, staying connected to a community. There's so many of us that are in isolation. And we're not doing well, and it's because we're relational creatures. We have to connect to people. We have to
That's right.
be around certain environments. So not only am I going to church, I'm going to workshops, I'm going to networking events. I host my own networking events. So I find different ways, different pockets of ways that I can connect with people. And sometimes it's just my former teammates, it's my friends. I'll just send them a quick text. Hey, I hope you're doing well. Just checking in. So
Checking in. Yeah.
times is I'm gonna check in on 5 of my guys a day. Takes me 10 minutes. Quick text check in just to feel them, but also feel myself. You'd be surprised at the feeling of fulfillment that you get from when you serve others, when you show up for others, when you connect and become the essence of what it is that you're looking for. Most of us are looking for joy, for peace, for happiness. Start providing that for somebody else and watch what it does for your life. And so that's how I try to live, man, and all those different components. Same thing nutrition wise. I try my nutrition routine is really that concept around moderation. Everything in moderation. So I'm not gonna go crazy on the ice cream. I'm not gonna go crazy on the fried foods. But I might have my cheat day, right? Once a week, there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm making sure that I'm staying hydrated. I'm making sure that I'm having cooked meals, right? And it's so easy now. So those are some of the things that I do. And the last thing I'll say is on Sundays, I make sure that I review my week. I track my wins. I write down the things that are going well and then improvements that I need to make as well. And if there's anybody who's listening to this who needs a resource or something that they can use, I have a tracker, a weekly tracker that you can download from my website. It's renniecurran.com/resources. Or if you go to the website, you'll see a resource tab and you can download that for free. So that's something that I use on a weekly basis to keep track. And like I mentioned, that auditing process that I use to really make sure that I'm staying on track and I'm evaluating how I'm moving and writing down my vision, writing down my goals for the year and making sure that I'm on track with.
Yeah, I love that. You are so intentional in every aspect of life, and that encourages me. And I think that's going to encourage a lot of other people as well. And so thanks for sharing that with us. I want to add one thing real quick. I love that you review your week and count your wins.
Yeah.
For some reason, our brains are wired
Mhm.
to remember the losses,
Yep.
and those wins escape us. And so how important is it for just our mental well-being, but then also for us to remember, of all the blessings,
Man.
for us to remember the things that God has really blessed us with this week, for us to remember the ways that we have succeeded and
Mhm.
not just the ways that we have failed. Super, super important
Yeah.
from a mental health standpoint. So I love that. I think that's super important. Now, when it comes to people connecting with you, because you're right, we are not meant to be isolated creatures. During the pandemic, we saw that mental health crashed for a lot of people because
Mhm.
we were so separated. And we've come out of that, and hopefully people are kind of getting back together. I'm reminded back, so my pastor brain thinks about, I'm reminded back in Genesis when God created the world, he said everything was good, right? Everything was very good. The first thing he said was not good was that it was not good for man to be alone.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Brothers and sisters, you were not made to do this alone. You need your friends, your family, your church family. You need connection. And so, and so, what I know about Rennie is he's doing great work in that field. If people want to connect with you, if people want to see what you're doing in the world and how you're showing up, and they want to support you, you mentioned your website. Can you give that to us again? And I'm going to have it in the show notes as well. And what are some other places they can find you at work?
Yeah. So the easiest way is through my website, renniecurran.com. You can go on there. You can book a time for a complimentary call with me. We can talk about your goals. We can talk about where you're trying to get to, and we can at least get you started. I love working with executives, with entrepreneurs, one-on-one. I do churches. I do workshops for companies, whether it's a lunch and learn or it's a leadership retreat, conferences. So those are all ways that you can be involved in, and we can work along with each other. So I am open. And then even if you just reach out to me on LinkedIn or you reach out to me on Twitter or on Facebook, I will respond. That's what most people don't know about me. Like, I'm very personable. I had a lot of people that helped me along my journey. And so my biggest thing is I'm going to serve in whatever capacity that I can. So like I said, feel free to reach out. And then I have tons of resources on my website as well, renniecurran.com. If you're somebody who's looking to become a speaker, if you're looking to improve, like in terms of your personal brand, or you're going through a transition, you're trying to reach new goals and be that high performing leader, like I mentioned before, I have a lot of things that can help you. So definitely feel free to reach out. Love mentoring as well. So if you have a kid, and those are things that I do all the time, speaking to young kids, just giving them those tips and things that have helped me along my journey. love being able to do that. So yeah, feel free to
Yeah.
reach out.
Awesome. And your book's on there as well. And I'll provide links to that. You've also written a kid's book with your daughter, right? Can you tell us
Oh
a
yeah.
little bit about that?
Yeah, the book is called "What Does It Take to Be a Star," and we wrote it when she was 8 years old. She's now about to turn 18 in 3 months,
Wow.
which is crazy. And
Wow.
so it was one of the most powerful experiences being able to share that with her, because not only was it about writing the book, but it was about instilling that confidence in her and the values to let her know that, hey, you can create, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be a speaker, you can inspire others. And so she's been able to take that and do a lot of different events with it. And I think it's just a powerful thing for those of you parents who are listening to be able to do with your child. Just help to show them that they can create, they can be an author, even if they're 8 years old. They don't have to wait. And
That's right.
it leads to some powerful things.
That's awesome. Rennie, brother, you are an inspiration. I love how you're showing up in the world. I love how you're using
Thank you.
the platform you've been given for the glory of God and for the help of other people. So thanks for serving well. Wish nothing but blessings on you and your foundation and your business and your family. You have been a treat, and I can't wait for you guys to check him out. So go visit his page. You're going to find everything there. I'm going to put links in the show notes. But Rennie, as we sign off, thanks, brother. You're a
So,
blessing.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me again, and keep up the amazing work that you're doing. For everybody listening, thank you for tuning in as well and for watching this. God bless you, and go Dogs.
And go Dog.